Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Yashodanandana Brajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Brajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajana Ranjana Yamuna Tiro Vanachari Yamuna Tiro Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Mansa Paribhagavacharya Sukharita Smadhakritam Saraswati Goswami Bhagavad Jaya Nanda Kori Vaishnava Ki Jaya Ramacharya Sri Haridas Thakur Ki Jaya Names of the whole Sri Krishna Sri Radha Krishna Go Gopala Sam Kanda Radha Kanda Giri Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai Ganga Maya Ki Jai Jamuna Maya Ki Jai Guru Bhaka Dham Ki Jai Swami Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to that. All glories to that. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna, everybody. Welcome to our ongoing discussion on Bhagavad Gita. Now we are in chapter 4, which is titled Transcendental Knowledge or Jnana Yoga. So we just began this chapter last week. I think some of you were not present there, and I apologize. I'm yet to post the recording. I'll do this over the weekend. I was sick, got a sore throat last week, and it has been very busy. So you might see me sneezing through the class. So please bear with me for that. Kashyap, I think you were there last time, right? In the last class. I believe we completed through verse number 3. Is that right?
Yes, Prabhu.
Yeah. Okay. So what we'll do is I'll do a quick revision of the first 3 verses. I'll give you the gist of it, especially for those who are not present. And then later you can catch up with the recording. You want to station? Okay. Yeah, so In the 4th chapter, Krishna begins by giving some context to Arjuna, where he's saying that, well, this knowledge, of Bhagavad Gita, it describes this as imperishable science. Again, that's an interesting word. The adjective that is used over here is imperishable. So I'll talk about it in a minute. But he mentions that this knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, actually it was spoken by me a long time ago, in the beginning of the reign of the current Manu. He first spoke it to the sun god, and then the sun god Vivaswan, whose name is Vivaswan, he instructed to Manu. So all these are positions, just like you have the president, vice president, the governor. So the sun god is a demigod, right? So that's a post. Personality is in charge of that particular position. Similarly, Manu, who is the father of mankind, is also a personality who, or a position. Manu is also a position, but that one day of Brahma, there are 14 Manus that appear, right? And the reign of each Manu is 71 Chaturyugas. One Chaturyuga is Satya, Treta, Dwapar, Kali, which is about 4.32 million years, one cycle. And so you can think the reign of Manu itself is very long. So here, Srila Prabhupada further explains in the purport, how ancient this knowledge is. Of course, this knowledge exists even before the creation, but here, an earlier instance where Krishna spoke Bhagavad Gita, he's saying, well, I spoke it to sun god and who Vivaswan, and the sun god is also different personalities at different point in time. So in this particular instance, it is Vivaswan who was occupying this position, and he instructed to Manu. So right now we are in the reign of the 7th Manu, right, or the 8th Manu, yeah. So right, so in the reign of this particular Manu, that's quite some time ago. I think we calculated this last time. It was like 200 million years, right? So it's a long time ago that this knowledge was spoken. Then Krishna further elaborates that, well, in the course of time, this disciplic succession was broken. And of course, this knowledge was passed on for some time in disciplic succession to the different saintly kings, and they understood this knowledge. But when you're talking about millions of years, it's a long time, and this disciplic succession was broken, and therefore this science appears to be lost. It says appears to be lost. I mean, it's not completely lost, but appears to be lost. So when you go over the recording, you will find that we discussed this in much more detail. We talked about, from a historical perspective, how this phenomena of parampara losing its essence over a period of time, it's applicable in all cultures and all religions. So no one is immune to that. Take Christianity, Islam, the Vedic traditions. And whenever that happens, Krishna appears, right? Either he himself appears or he sends an empowered personality, an acharya, who will reinstate the lost knowledge. Or even if the knowledge is there, it has lost its essence. It's not properly understood or properly followed, and it needs to be reestablished. So Krishna he either does it himself or sends someone to do that. And in the next verse, he says that, well, now that this knowledge is lost, I'm re-establishing it, right? I'm speaking this knowledge again to you, Arjuna. And why? Because you are my devotee and a friend. So we also discussed at length this two criteria that makes one eligible to become, to receive this knowledge, right? So it's not simply a matter of philosophical speculation, or it's not one cannot understand this knowledge simply by the faculty of mind or intelligence, right? So the quality that's needed is one should have a devotional mood, right? Because it's a devotional subject matter, and Arjuna met those requirements, so he is qualified to receive this knowledge, and only such a person can understand the transcendental mystery. Guhyam, that's the word that is used here. So Guhya, you can also translated as a secret, guhyam. It's not the kind of secret that you don't want to share with others. Rather, it's secret or guhyam. In this context, secret is probably is not contextually the right translation, but in one way it is still a secret because it's only accessible to those who qualify to receive this knowledge and who have the proper attitude to understand this knowledge. They can understand it. So in that sense, it's a mystery, right? Why is it mystery? Because sometimes so many people they have heard about Bhagavad Gita, they have read it, but it just seems very mystical to them, right? Mysterious to them. They cannot access the essence of it. So one has to be really qualified to be able to do that. So again, going back to this word imperishable science. Science means the realized knowledge. I mean, you can practically apply the learnings in your life, and then you can see its effect, right? So it's a science, vigyan, realized knowledge, and it's imperishable means the from an external perspective, it appears, when an academic, another thing we discussed a lot last time is how an academician, scholar, or an academic scholar approaches this subject matter, right? Just like this, like to study so many subject matters, they might also be interested in studying the Vedic history in the Department of Hinduism or the Department of South Asian Studies, and they might have PhDs in it, but they are simply trying to lick the bottle of honey from the outside. They don't have any experience of practicing. They might be able to talk a lot about it. Many of them, many of the things that they might say again would be biased or not sincere to the tradition, and so they have no access to it, right? But when they write about Hinduism or Vedas, they try to put it in a historical context. Well, Vedas were written, some 1,000 years ago. And their timeline again doesn't match with the timeline that is described and understood by the practitioners of this tradition. But regardless of that, they when they say like Ved Vyas, he wrote the Vedas 5,000 years ago. Well, they don't accept 5,000 years ago, but the beginning of Kali Yuga, their estimate is even a shorter time length. But uh, they say that's when this, the some of this text came about, and that's the beginning of the religion. But it's our understanding is that, well, that's when it was written down. But before that, it was Shruti and Smriti. Shruti is the knowledge that is passed on just by oral reception, and people who at the time really had good memory, they were known as Shrutidhar. You hear something once, you'll remember all your life. There was no need to write it down. And this knowledge has been there since the beginning of creation. Rather, the better way to say that would is that it's there even before the creation. This Vedas, they are known as apaurushaya. That means they are not a product of human creation. They exist prior to the creation. So Vedas are also personalities. They are persons in the spiritual world, and in essence, they are the blueprint, or the of all knowledge. Like just by if you want to create something, you want to create material world, and the design or the blueprint of it has to exist before that. Just like anything that we create in this world, we design it first and we create it. So that comes before the creation itself. Just like you buy any product, it will come with a manual. Manual also has different features. Now these features are already planned before they even build the product. Now they might have compiled the manual at a later point in time, but it's not that the knowledge did not exist. It was there, right? Even before things were getting created. Similarly, Vedas, from an external perspective, it might appear, oh, it was written at a particular point in time, but just because it was written at a particular time doesn't mean that that knowledge did not exist prior to that. Just like a manual might be, finalized and made it in the life cycle of a product. One makes a prototype and minimum viable product, and they launch it, right? And then when they launch it, just before the launch, they might actually finalize the manual, but then the components of that, it's not that it did not exist before that, right? So same concept applies. So this knowledge is imperishable. Why is it imperishable? That it manifests and it unmanifests. So like here, Krishna is saying this knowledge was lost. The succession was broken over a period of time. So if it was broken, then why is it imperishable? Right? Somebody might ask that. Well, so it is broken. That means it's not widely available. That succession is broken, but there are always personalities who, at any given point in time, they know the knowledge as is, but that the parampara is not prominent, at that point in time, and the succession, it seems to be broken, and an empowered personality appears and revives it. So the knowledge manifests and unmanifests. But it doesn't mean that it's lost. The sun rises and it sets, right? So in few days it's going to be the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. So we have a lot of daylight. So anyway, when the sun sets, and then it doesn't mean the sun is destroyed. It's going to rise again the next morning. So just because it's not visible to us doesn't mean that it does not exist. Similarly, there are times when this Vedic knowledge is not manifest in the human society, in the sense that it's not widely practiced. And so in that sense, that succession is broken, but it is imperishable in the sense that it's not totally lost. It's just a matter of time that will be revived again. So that's how we understand that. I think this is a good summary. I think we'll continue with verse number 4. But if there are any questions, I'll just take a pause for a minute. If anyone wanted to comment on the summary so far. Okay, so let's begin with verse 4. Arjuna uvacha aparam bhavato janma param janma vivashvatah katham etat vijaniyam tvamado proktavan iti. So here is a reference to Vivashvatah, right? That is the sun. So yeah, translation. Translation purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation. Arjuna said, the sun god Vivashman is senior by birth to you. How am I to understand that in the beginning you instructed this science to him? So Arjuna is putting this in a historical context. Hey, Krishna, you are about the same age as me. So of all the 5 brothers or the 5 Pandavas, Arjuna was of the same age as Krishna. Yudhishthir, Bhima, they were elder to Krishna, and Nakul Sahadev, they were younger to Krishna. And Arjuna and Krishna had a good bonding because they were of the same age. And so Arjuna is saying, well, you are about the same age as me, but the sun god Vivashman, millions of years ago, he appeared. How is it that you instructed him? How do I understand this? So that's an appropriate question. So far, Krishna has not explained his position, right? I mean, if you, in the Bhagavad Gita, when Vyasadeva has written, or when Sanjay is saying to Dhritarashtra, he's saying, well, Sri Bhagavan Vacha, that's for us. But Krishna is not yet established that he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, right? He's just having a conversation with Arjuna. And so it's not formally established yet. And so such a question might be very natural, where the real position of Krishna is not fully known. Of course, we know it because we have been reading the purports that Srila Prabhupada has elaborated on right from the beginning. And Srila Prabhupada did that because what if somebody starts reading Bhagavad Gita, they do not go beyond the first chapter, then still they should get the essence of Bhagavad Gita. And so right from the beginning, Srila Prabhupada is establishing Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But if you look at the text or the translation itself or the verses itself, so far this has not been established. So purport, Srila Prabhupada says that Arjuna is an accepted devotee of the Lord. So how is it that he could not believe the Krishna's words? Because just the verse before, Krishna said that, hey, I am instructing you because you are my devotee and you are my friend. So if Arjuna is already a devotee, then how is it that Arjuna does not accept what Krishna is saying. So Srila was explaining, well, Arjuna is inquiring on the behalf of the audience, because now Krishna is saying, Krishna already gave the hint, I'm re-establishing this knowledge, right? Sometimes people argue, hey, this knowledge is only spoken for Arjuna. Bhagavad Gita was spoken only to Arjuna. They say, why are you taking it and applying it on your life? What is the what is the logic, right? It's a very personal instruction to Arjuna. Why did you make a scripture out of it? Well, the hint is here, right? In the previous verse, Krishna is saying this knowledge is lost. I'm re-establishing it. He said this was a disciplic succession. That means it's not simply for Arjuna. He's re-establishing this disciplic succession for everyone. And since Krishna have given that hint, Arjuna is saying, okay, if this is going to be a succession, then the inquiries are not just for me, it is for others as well. So Arjuna is inquiring on the behalf of others, so who do not believe in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Or even for people who have demoniac mentality, and who do not have any idea that Krishna should be accepted as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For those individuals, Arjuna is making this inquiry as if he is himself not aware of the personality of Godhead. So that happens many times, right? Even in our other daily dealings, I remember when I attended, used to have conferences, and not I'm attending conferences as a host, and it means our company is organizing this conference, and then our clients and suppliers, they come and attend it, and our VP, would make a presentation, and then they will open up Q&As for audience, and sometimes the audience is a little shy, or sometimes they just might not have any question. And so we planned questions in the sense that you're all prepared. So we already have our all cheat sheets, and we ask questions, but from the perspective of problems that our clients or suppliers would be interested in, and we would ask as if we don't know, and then the person who is presenting, the VP, would answer that, and that it's an icebreaker, and people start asking, and every now and then we would interject our own questions. So it's a common practice. It's not something very unique to this particular uh, um, scenario that or the situation in which Arjuna is, right? So he's inquiring on the behalf of the audience, the future audience, all of us. So as it will be evident in the 10th chapter, Arjuna knew perfectly well that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that he is the fountainhead of everything, and the last word in transcendence. So fountainhead, just like the head of the fountain is the source of all the different streams of water. You go to a water fountain and there is one nozzle, which is the head, the fountain head. From that nozzle, there are many streams of water which go in different directions. So similarly, in here in Washington area, right, we have so many trails, and then you go and drive to a trailhead, right? What's a trailhead? You park your car and you go to a trailhead. Well, trailhead is a location where a lot of trails merge, or if you're starting, it's a beginning where on one spot you could go in 4 different directions. It's the head from which you can go. Similarly, Godhead is a term. I mean, you generally don't find in a widely used in English language, but the same concept, Godhead, refers, because see, people have different ideas about gods, and especially in the Vedic tradition, when you have 330 million demigods and demigoddesses, and in the common man or the layman's understanding is that they worship a deity with whom they have an attachment, and then they would have an understanding that all gods are equal, right? Or they might have understanding, well, the absolute truth is impersonal, but that impersonal appears or manifests into a lot of different personalities, and they are all gods, right? All the 330 million devas and devis. So in order to make clarify the real position of Krishna, well, Krishna is not Jiva Tattva. The demigods, they are Jiva Tattva, they are souls. That means we also can become devas by dint of our pious activity. There are positions, as we say. Manu is a position that anyone can acquire by dint of piety. So that, of course, that reign lasts for millions of years, so it's not obvious to people. But Krishna is not Jiva Tattva. Krishna is Vishnu Tattva. He is different. So just to establish that, Sri Prabhupada he uses this word supreme. That means he is supremely positioned compared to the other demigods, and he is not impersonal. He is a personality, and he is a godhead, meaning he is the source of all, not only all the demigods, but even other incarnations of Vishnu. They are all expansions of Krishna. In some other Vaishnava Sampradayas, the primary worship is Vishnu, and they have this understanding that, well, Krishna expands from Vishnu. Because what happens even in Krishna Leela, when the earth was not able to bear the weight of all the sins, she approached Brahma, and Brahma and all the demigods went to the shore of the milk ocean, and they offered prayers to Vishnu. And Vishnu says, don't worry, I'm going to appear very soon. And so, based on that, it appears that, oh, Vishnu has appeared now as Krishna, which is not completely untrue. But that is true, because all incarnations, when they appear on this earth, they are manifestations of Vishnu. But Krishna does not need to follow that protocol, but he still follows that same protocol. But then you find out who is the source of Vishnu, right? And that is described in Bhagavatam. The Shirodaksai Vishnu in this material world, right? Is expansion of the four forms of Vishnu outside of the material world, right? In the Virja River, the Chaturvyuhas, which is Vasudev, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, Anirudh. Yeah, and then that Vasudev, those quadruple expansions are further in Vishnu Loka. They are expansions of actually there are two sets of those Chaturvyuhas, which is Vasudev, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Anirudh. They exist in the Vaikuntha Lokas and also in Dwarka. In the Dwarka form, it's Krishna. So Krishna himself is Vasudev, right? Sankarshan is Balram, and then there's son, Krishna's first son Pradyumna, and then his grandson is Anirudh. Now Dwarka Krishna, is expansion from Mathura Krishna, and Mathura Krishna is expansion of Goloka Krishna. So ultimately you come to the Vrindavan Krishna, or which is the original personality, because in that person all the rasas, 5 rasas, are fully manifest. So anyway, so that is the understanding, and so Krishna is the godhead of not only all the demigods but also all the Vishnu expansions. So coming back to the original theme of the discussion, so Krishna appeared as a son of Devaki on this earth, and how Krishna remained the same personality of Godhead, the eternal original person, is very difficult to understand for an ordinary man, right? So that's what I was addressing. And people, they get confused. Oh, okay, Krishna, they might accept Krishna in the expansion of Vishnu and say, okay, Vishnu is supreme. But many of them don't have even that understanding. And those who have that understanding, then they are bewildered. Where does Vishnu come from? And that's why I explained, based on Srimad Bhagavatam, that the Vishnu in this world, Shirodakshay Vishnu is there, who lies on the shore of the milk ocean. But his source is the Chaturvyuhas, and then there are 2 sets of Chaturvyuhas, and they ultimately you can trace it to Krishna of Golok Vrindavan. So therefore, to clarify this point, Arjuna put this question before Krishna so that he himself could speak authoritatively. Yeah, so Krishna can establish, when you ask the question, Krishna is right there, and he can establish what the truth is. So that Krishna is the supreme authority, that Krishna is the supreme authority is accepted by the whole world, not only at the present but the time immemorial. And the demons alone reject him. That means obviously not everyone accepts him, but those who have those who are divine in nature, the devas. Devas are interested in sense enjoyment, but they accept the authority of Vishnu or Krishna. Those who have asuric propensities, they do not accept. That's why they are called asuras or danavas. They are also interested in sense enjoyment, but they want to enjoy independently of Krishna. Anyway, since Krishna is the authority accepted by all, Arjuna put this question before him. In order that Krishna would describe himself without being depicted by the demons who always try to distort him in a way understandable to the demons and their followers. So apparently they have their own parampara of misrepresenting or misexplaining the position of Krishna. So Krishna's response will establish what his real position is. So it is necessary that everyone, for their own interest, know this science of Krishna. Therefore, when Krishna himself speaks about himself, it is auspicious for all the worlds. Krishna's words are non-different from him. The knowledge that he is providing is auspicious for everyone. To the demons, such explanation by Krishna himself may appear to be strange. They cannot understand. It's not accessible. This is guhyam. It's mysterious because demons always study Krishna. Excuse me. It's almost like an allergic reaction. Once I start sneezing, sometimes I don't stop. Yeah. So why is it that? Just like the difference is that they try to understand Krishna from their own standpoint. They don't try to understand Krishna from an absolute position. For them, all truth is relative truth. There's no such thing as absolute truth. That is the worldview of people in general. They say that all truth is relative truth. There is no such thing as absolute truth. And so they always try to understand things from their own standpoint. Because they see there are so many contradictions, they think how can there can be any absolute truth, because whoever is looking at things, there can be no one who is not biased. Everyone is biased. If you say devotees, the devotees are also biased. But so of course the devotees, they are biased in a different way, in the sense their bias is there, but their bias is influenced by the position or the knowledge that Krishna has provided. But even then, we all are different persons. We have a slightly different understanding of even the knowledge that we receive from Krishna, or how we perceive Krishna, how we see Krishna. And so, especially how we see Krishna, there is a difference, even among devotees, even among Vaishnava Sampradayas. And so when an academic scholar or somebody who is looking Krishna from their own standpoint, and that propensity, of course, is described as asuric. But what happens is when somebody looks from their own viewpoint, they see how can there be an absolute truth? Even among the devotees of Krishna, you all have a different view or understanding of Krishna. Just like when Krishna appeared, or Krishna arrived in Mathura from Vrindavan, Kamsa had invited him. He had made a plot to kill Krishna, and he invited him in the pretext of, why don't you come and see this beautiful city of Mathura, and we are going to have a lot of sports and wrestling matches, and you can come and participate this and enjoy. And so his plan was to kill Krishna. Of course, he had been trying to kill Krishna since he was born, and he had been unsuccessful. So finally, there's a long story. Eventually, when Krishna and Balaram, they arrive in the arena, and the fight is about to begin, and there are so many different people who are present in the audience, and they all perceived Krishna differently, right? And so even in the scriptures, when we see descriptions, those academic scholars, they say, well, there's no question of absolute truth. But in that explanation in the Krishna book, it nicely describes how they all reconcile. It's a very beautiful verse. Maybe I should pull that up. Krishna, Balaram in the arena. Hopefully that should be good enough keyword. And if I do a filter for Krishna book, it should hopefully pop up. I think let me add one more. That was lightning bolt, and Kamside appeared as death. All of them had a different view of Krishna. Yeah, I think this is somewhere around here. Yeah, chapter 43. So after the killing the elephant, Krishna arrived in the arena. See here, when Krishna entered the wrestling arena with Balram and their friends, he appeared differently to different people according to their different relationships or rasas with him. Krishna is the reservoir of all pleasure, and all kinds of rasas, both favorable and unfavorable, exist in him. He appeared to the wrestlers exactly like a thunderbolt. When the wrestlers saw Krishna and Balaram, they thought, "Wow, this they are young boys, but their bodies are so strong, as strong as thunderbolt." Mm. To the people in the audience in general who were watching the match, the wrestling match, for them, he appeared as the most beautiful of all personalities. To all the female members who were present, he appeared to be the most attractive male, Cupid, Kamadev personified, and thus he increased their lust. To the cowherd men who were also present there, they came from Vrindavan along with him. When they looked upon Krishna as their own kinsmen, coming from the same village of Vrindavan, so they just saw him as one of their kinsmen. The impious Kshatriyas who were present, they saw him as the strongest ruler and their chastiser. So they could see, these are not ordinary personality, and they are afraid, they can chastise him. Now the parents of Krishna were also present, right? So the parents of Krishna, Nanda and Yasoda, he appeared to be the most loving child. For them, they are just, he's still a child. For parents, child doesn't matter how grown up the child is always a child. They're always worried. They would give instructions on, you should do this, do not do that. To Kamsa, the king of the Bhoja dynasty, appeared to be the death personified. So Kamsa had been all his life since Krishna was born, he was always worried about death, his impending death because of the prediction or the Akashvani. To the unintelligent, he appeared to be an incapable personality. Those who do not know the position of Krishna, they perceived him differently. He says, he's just, what is this? Just a child. What can he do? Why is he here in the wrestling arena? Look at all the wrestlers. They are so powerful and strong. What could these two kids achieve? To the yogis who were present there, who know the position of Krishna, to them he appeared as a super soul. And to the members of Vrishni dynasty, the same dynasty in which Krishna has appeared, he appeared to be the most celebrated descendant. So among all the descendants, he was the most celebrated, and they look forward to him. They knew why Krishna has appeared, and so they were very excited. Thus, appreciated differently by different kinds of people present, Krishna entered the wrestling arena with Balram and his cowherd boys. Right? Yeah, and then there's further description of what happens later. But the point over here is that, well, which one of this is true? Well, all of this is true. In Krishna, all apparent contradictions, even if something is contradictory, they all reconcile within him, and that's why he's absolute. So you talked about this in the past. An ordinary person is favorable to his friends, but despises others who are enemies or those who are envious. Krishna, on the other hand, accepts anyone who approaches him, whether in a favorable attitude or an unfavorable attitude. He makes no distinction. And it says that, well, if Krishna is also making the distinction between a devotee, a deva, and an asura, then what is the difference between him and an ordinary person? And that's why even the demons which are killed by Krishna, they get the same position as devotees in the spiritual world. Just like Putana, who wanted to poison Krishna, and for that she offered her breast milk. So Krishna ignored the fact that it was poisoned, the milk was poisoned, but the fact that she offered her breast milk to him, he accepted Putana as his mother. And that means though he sucked her life breath out of her chest, he gave her the position of a mother equivalent to that of Yashoda in the spiritual world. So just like an absolute function, if you pass a positive number, you pass, say, plus 10 to an absolute function, the response is plus 10. If you pass minus 10, you still get plus 10. So there is no difference. So there is no, even if devotees or any person, they might have their own subjective understanding or realization of Krishna, it is not contradictory. Because in the Supreme, all contradictions reconcile. Hope that makes sense. I'll just take a brief pause before I continue with the purport. It's quite a long purport. Okay. So devotees will always worship such authoritative statements of Krishna because they're always eager to know more and more about him. The atheists who consider Krishna as an ordinary man may in this way come to know that Krishna is superhuman, that he is Satta, Chitta, Ananda, and Vigraha. He is a person. He is a personality of all truth, all knowledge, and all bliss. It means he's the eternal form of bliss, knowledge, and then he is transcendental. That he is above the domination of the modes of material nature and above the influence of time and space. So everything in this material world is creation of the three modes of nature. This we have discussed in the past: sattva, raja, tama, goodness, passion, ignorance. And everything is limited by time and space. This also we have discussed. I am here, that I cannot be somewhere else. Or if I am dedicating my time for this particular exercise, I cannot dedicate my time for something else. So I'm limited by time, I'm limited by space. And I have acquired this body, though I'm spirit soul, I've acquired this body which is composed of the three modes of nature. So Krishna is not such a person. His body is all spirit. There's no difference between him and his body. His body is not a product of the three modes of nature. Though it might appear, even during the war, Mahabharata war, he was a charioteer. And he did not use any weapons. And as the arrows were being shot, sometimes they kill the charioteer also. But even when they are shooting at Arjuna, Krishna would get wounded and blood would ooze out from his body. So from an external perspective, it appears, well, hey, what's the difference? He just looks like us, right? But his body is not a product of matter. And he is not limited by time and space. He could expand in his Dwarka Leela also. We see he expanded himself into 16,108 forms because he had 16,108 wives. So he was not limited by space. Wherever he could associate with his devotees at all time. And then he's not limited by time. Rather, time is an impersonal expansion of Krishna himself. So devotee of Krishna like Arjuna is undoubtedly above any misunderstandings of the transcendental position of Krishna. So there is no misunderstanding. The devotees, they have proper understanding of what the position of Krishna is. But Arjuna is asking a question simply as an attempt by a devotee to defy the atheistic attitude which is prevalent widely, right, of persons who consider Krishna to be an ordinary human being. as if he is subject to the modes of nature. Any questions?
Prabhuji, when you mentioned about how Lord Krishna expands into first Balram and then the fourth quadruple expansion and then
Vasudev,
the,
Sankarsana, Pradyumna, Anirudh. Yes.
yeah. At what time, when does he expand as Radha Rani?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in the spiritual world, we see there are so many expansions, right? Expansions of Krishna. Well, his internal or the pleasure potency of Krishna is personified in Radharani. So Radharani is Hladini Sakti. Hladini means pleasure giving potency, like Prahalad, Ahlad, right? Ahlad, the bird, Aha, right? Pleasure comes from the same root. And so Krishna then also, that's one expansion, the feminine potency, the energy of Krishna, his feminine nature, is also a person. And the Guru Tattva, the aspect of Krishna which instructs others, that is expanded as Balram. And then from Balram, there are other expansions. So in the spiritual world, there are different personalities, and one might obviously question, well, what is the source of them? Well, the source of all of them is Krishna. Now, particularly when you ask, like, when Krishna expanded into Radharani, of course, Chaitanya Charitamrita says that originally Radha and Krishna were one. They were one person. And Krishna expanded his pleasure potency into another form, which is Radharani. And now they have become one again in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna in the mood of Radharani. He accepted the mood and bhava, complexion also of Radharani, just to experience what it is like a devotee. And like he feels that his devotees, they are enjoying, or they are getting much more pleasure than he himself is getting. His devotees are getting more pleasure from his associations. He wanted to taste that. So that then the question is, well, when does all this happen? Well, in the spiritual world, there is no concept of time. So at what point this happens? So because there is no time in spiritual world, we cannot pinpoint that at this particular instance, this expansion happened. Just like we are parts and parcels of Krishna, and in the sense that we also expanded from him. So when did that expansion happen? So it's almost like a dilemma in the sense, how do you resolve this? So one thing to understand is that in the spiritual world, when we say there is no time, that means the time does not move in a chronological fashion, in the sense that here Kal Chakra decides, well, after the day there is night, after summer there is monsoon, and then there is what is it, autumn, then fall and winter, right? So it happens in a cyclic fashion. The chakra, the Kala Chakra, just like the gears of a car or any machine, they are moving in an ordained fashion. You cannot skip things. But in spiritual world, time does not move like synchronous and asynchronous. I think all of us are familiar, probably, if you're working in a technology company. Synchronous and asynchronous. Sometimes we make these calls, like what they call API calls, and the call, or the integration could be synchronous or it could be an async. So maybe you can think of it in that fashion. In the spiritual world, the seasons change asynchronously, in the sense it's not in a chronological pattern. It can jump from monsoon to winter in the next moment, but the time is serving the needs, or is trying to make arrangements for different pastimes of Krishna and his devotees to manifest, depending on their dynamic mood and what their mental propensity is. The things are adjusted accordingly. Um, so in that sense, there is no tracking of time, in the sense, how do you track when something is not moving chronologically, right? If you have I have a timer over here. I can start a timer stopwatch and it starts from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And then you can track how many seconds, minutes, or hours passed. And so that is a digital clock. But then this clock by nature's arrangement. And what is that clock? Well, you look in the sky. Earlier, people, the Polynesians, the seafaring communities, when they went from Polynesia to Hawaii, or they're traveling in the oceans, or the nomadic tribes or the merchants traveling through sub-Saharan deserts on the camelbacks in the caravan. And they just look at the sky and the stars, and if you observe the sky daily, then you know how the sky is moving, what is the position of the planets, in what constellation, and you can make out how many days have passed. It seems all mysterious to us right now, but if you study, it's not difficult. The astronomy, when there are patterns. For instance, if the moon is uh, rising at around midnight, then you can conclude that it is the waning moon. A waning moon would rise at midnight, not midnight, but in the night. If it's 8th day of the waning moon, then it rises at midnight. If it is the 8th day of waxing moon, then moon would rise at noon. You see, a full moon will always rise in the evening, just at the time of dusk, and a new moon will always rise at sunrise. So you can observe the sky and you can track time, and everything is moving in a chronological fashion. But in spiritual world, how do you track time? Right? In one moment there is night, and after some time, it might immediately switch to noon, skipping the morning. Or the season could change. So in that sense, you really cannot trace, but it is eternal in the sense that you're fixed in that moment. So you can say that, well, there was in one sense, there was never a time when Radharani did not exist. Radharani was always there. There was never a time we did not exist, because that's what we learned in the second chapter, when the nature of soul, Krishna is saying to Arjuna, well, there was never a time that the kings did not exist, where I did not exist, you did not exist. There was never a time means even in the spiritual world. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada was explaining that that doesn't mean that the spiritual world, the identity is lost. But from a rasa perspective, there could be a past time where now the energy and the energetic are one. Right? You cannot describe me in the absence of my energy. Right? Energy does not exist in vacuum. Right? So energy is possessed by the energetic. That means the pleasure-giving potency is also existing in Krishna. And at some point, just for the sake of pastime, where Krishna is saying, well, I am feeling alone. I want my pleasure-giving potency to be a person. And there could have been an instance or a pastime where Krishna expanded his pleasure potency into a personality, which is Radharani. But again, that does not mean that Radharani did not exist before that particular instance. It's just that Krishna is experiencing a feeling or a mood where so Radharani might have always been existing, right? I mean, as a person, not might. She is existing, but then Krishna feels that, well, she is not there, and I'm only one person, and I need to expand myself, right? So, it's difficult for us to conceive a world where time is not there, especially in a chronological fashion. So how all of these exist. So you can think of that more of a pastime perspective. Like Krishna is, by the arrangement of his internal yoga maya, Krishna is made to forget that he is God himself, right? So that he can enjoy his loving pastimes with his devotees. Just like when Mother Yasoda is chastising him, Krishna is not acting that I am fearful. He's really fearful. He's really crying, right? He's really experiencing it. So does it mean he is under the control of Yog Maya? So the example that is given is that, like a jailer, when he goes inside a cell, a prison cell, right? And then he would ask the guard, hey, lock the door. I'm going to investigate this criminal, right? Or, but he's for a purpose. Now he's also being locked. The prisoner is also being locked, right? But the position of the jailer and the prisoner is different. The jailer is there by choice, and he can come out any moment. Similarly, Krishna is made to forget by his own choice. He wants Yog Maya to arrange all these pastimes for him. So similarly, when Krishna is feeling that this my pleasure giving potency is not a person, it's only existing within me, and I need to expand her into a person. That does not mean that Radharani did not exist, but he's made to he's made to experience or feel that, oh, I am alone, right? And so in that particular context, he's experiencing that, but that does not mean Radharani did not exist. And there could be a past time, acharyas have that realization where, they can see all this uh, uh, past times in the spiritual world. And so in one particular instance, there could be a scenario where, hey, Krishna expanded himself into Radharani, but it's not that she did not exist prior to that. And we see that when Krishna appears on this in this material world, and you say, oh, when Krishna has a conch cell, Panchajanya. And how did he get Panchajanya? Well, he killed a demon a conch demon, and then he took that conch cell, and then he started using it, and that is conch cell called Panchajanya. And then you would see, well, somebody gifted him Kaustuba jewel, or when he appears as Vamanadev, we see in Srimad Bhagavatam, different demigods, they gave him different gifts. Somebody gave him or Samudra Manthan when it happened, right? The churning of the milk ocean. And from that, the Kaustuba money came. And Krishna accepted the Kaustuba money, or Vishnu accepted the Kaustuba money. So does it mean that Vishnu did not have Kaustuba money before that? The Kaustuba money is an eternal paraphernalia of the Lord, right? He always has Kaustuba money. But in that instance, it appears as if he was gifted. That doesn't mean he did not have prior to that. So so in that past time, it appears like that. Kaustuba Mani is also a person and a devotee of the Lord, and he is eternally an associate of the Lord. So I gave a long answer to this, but I hope you get the gist of it, right?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Yeah. Any other questions? No? Okay, we'll move on to the next verse number 5. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Bahuni me Vyatitani Janmani Tavacharjuna Tani Aham Veda Sarvani Natvam Vedha Parantapa. Translation: Supreme Personality of Godhead said, many, many births, both you and I have passed. I can remember all of them, but you cannot, O subduer of enemy. So here, I think this is probably the first verse where Krishna is, establishing his unique position in one aspect. And there are so many ways Krishna is supreme, but in one particular way, well, we do not recall our previous lives. And in some rare occasions, there are individuals who are able to recall their past life, and that is also immediate past life. And cannot find, at least there's no documented case where people have been able to recall not only their previous life, but the many lives before that in a successive fashion. But there are many instances, documented instances. There's a professor, Stephen, what is his name? Dr. Stevenson. He passed away. I think he's no more, but I think it's some university in Pennsylvania. And then in the Department of Psychology or Perception, he spent all his life researching and documenting instances of reincarnations all over the world in all cultures, not just unique to the subcontinent. And young children with who just learned how to speak, they describe with amazing accuracy. They say, I was such and such person in this village, this city, and this my family member, this is the name. And he would go and verify it. And when you go and see, you will find, well, that's true. And they will say, oh, this person died in this cause. And there are many documented incidents of people able to remember their immediate previous life. And another phenomena that he has extensively documented is sometimes when somebody dies of a tragic death, that means an accident, And that means there is generally an injury. Suppose somebody had a car accident or whatever, right? And maybe they got a severe injury in their chest, or there was a slice or a cut in their chest. Then when they are reborn in another body and they're able to recall that previous life, in almost all instances where they were able to recall their previous life, and if they died in their previous life out of a trauma or an accident, they would carry that same physical mark in their next birth. So their birthmark, you would see that, on their chest, the slice or the cut, I mean, it's just as a birthmark, a line would be there. And they would say, well, I died of this accident or whatever in previous life. And it will give you exact details. And it's generally, as a child, it's not a long time ago. So you can go and validate that happened now. Child would have never gone there, right? So, and you can ascertain by physical marks also. And this is almost in every case of a trauma they have found. So anyway, there are people who are able to remember their previous life. They are called jati smara. That's a term that is used in the scriptures. So anyway, here Krishna is saying, well, you don't remember your previous lives. Well, I do. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada mentions, so there is this verse in Brahma Samhita, verse 33, now the 5th chapter, which is the only chapter of Brahma Samhita, which is extant today. Brahma had compiled 100 chapters. All of them were lost except eventually the 5th one was found in South India. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that pastime is there. So anyway, verse number 33 of the 5th chapter, which is the only extant chapter of Brahma Samhita known today, says Advaita Achyuta Manadi Ananta Rupam Adyam Purana Purusham Nam Yonam Cha Vedesu Durlabham Adurlabham Atma Bhakto Govindam Adi Purusham Tam Ham Bhajami. I worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda, who is the original person. He is absolute. He is infallible, does not fall down. He is without beginning, Adi. Although expanded into unlimited forms, he is still the same original person. Now Yovanam. He always appears like a 16-year-old young boy. He never gets old. The prime age. Despite of being the oldest, he is always useful, appearing as a fresh youth. Such eternal, blissful, all-knowing forms of the Lord are usually not understood by even the best Vedic scholars. But they're always manifest to the pure, unalloyed devotees. Even demigods get confused, right? So we have incidents in Krishna Leela. Just a second. Because see, all Brahma and all the demigods, they approached Vishnu and requested him to appear. And Vishnu said, yes, yes, I'm going to appear. Now, when they saw Krishna, even Brahma was bewildered. How can this young boy be Vishnu? How can he be God? So he tested him by kidnapping all the cowherd boys and all the cows and took them away for 1 year. And Krishna expanded himself into those gopas and the cows, so much so that their family member loved those expansions more than they loved their own child, of course, because they're Krishna. And Brahma was bewildered. How is it possible? I mean, this kind of I have the potency to expand, but even I don't have such a potency, but I can replicate an exact form. How Krishna did. So even the demigods, they are bewildered. They cannot understand that. They think Vishnu is the supreme, and when Krishna appears, they think, oh, Krishna is an expansion of Vishnu. They don't understand. Well, Krishna actually is the source of Vishnu. So what to speak about? If demigods are getting confused, what to speak about rest of the Vedic scholars? They cannot understand the position of Krishna. So that's why Brahma has some insights. So Brahma is saying this, compiling this verse. He says, Vedesu Durlabham. Durlabham. You cannot understand Govinda by studying the Vedas. One might be expert in Vedic knowledge, but he cannot get a full understanding of Krishna. Because again, the Vedic knowledge is cryptic. It does not directly describe the original personality of God, just like Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam describes. But the purpose of the Vedas is to know me. Krishna, later other place he says, Vedescha sarver aham eva vedya. The purpose of the Vedas is to know me. But here Brahma is saying, though the purpose of the Vedas might be to know Krishna, you cannot understand Krishna simply by reading the Vedas. Another place, again in Brahma Samhita, it says, Ramadi Murti Sukalani Amena Tisthan Nana Avatar Karod Bhuvaneshu Kintu Krishna Swayam Sambhavat Parama Pumanayo Govindamadi Purusham Tamham Bhajami. Then Brahma says, I worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead Govinda, who is always situated in various incarnations such as Rama, Narsimha, and many sub-incarnations as well, but who is the original personality of Godhead known as Krishna and who incarnates personally also. So Rama, Narsimha, all incarnations, though they appear to be expansions of Vishnu, actually they are expansions of Krishna because Vishnu himself is an expansion of Krishna. That's why here Brahma getting some insights into that. He's establishing that Nana Avatar. Nana means so many different incarnations. They are all expansion of Krishna. And even Krishna Swayam, sometimes he himself appears. Sometimes his incarnations appear. Krishna Swayam Sambhavat, when he appears himself personally, that is the Parampuman. That is the original person when he appears personally. So in the Vedas, it is also in the Vedas also it is said that Lord, although one without a second, manifests himself in innumerable forms. So that's another aspect which is confusing when people they try to understand from their own standpoint. He says, I am a person, I am a limited. Now, if you say God is a person, that means he would also be limited, because as soon as you say form limits you, right? So I am limited, God is also limited. Well, God cannot be limited. That means God cannot have a form, right? So that's how people come to the impersonal understanding of the Lord. Because as you know, form also, as soon as you say person means, well, he will have emotions and feelings and angers, and maybe if he has the same emotions and angers and other kind of feelings, positive, negative connotations, then well, then he would be just like me, an ordinary personality. So that means the God cannot have a person, right? So that's how people come to impersonal understanding. So though Lord has a form, he is not limited by the form. So that means he does not have a material form, right? And his form is not limiting. Actually, his form actually enables him to expand and experience all his pastimes and desires. So the example that is given is like a Vaidurya stone. We don't have any experience of all these gems of ancient times. Maybe there are Vaidurya stones. I personally have not seen one. But this Vaidurya stone changes colors, yet still remains one. So apparently the stone has this feature by which it can change color under a different situation, maybe. But the stone is still the same. Similarly, all the multi-forms of Krishna, they are understood by the pure, unalloyed devotees, but not by simply the study of the Vedic scriptures. Vedesu durlabam adurlabam atma bhakto. Cannot understand simply by academic study. So devotees like Arjuna are constant companions of the Lord. And whenever the Lord incarnates, the associate devotees also incarnate in order to serve the Lord in different capacities. So this is a proper understanding. So Arjuna was with Krishna not just in this particular lifetime. He is an eternal associate of the Lord. So in another pastime, Arjuna and Krishna, they appeared as Nar Narayana. Arjuna is Nar and Narayana in Satyuga. So you go to Badrinath, Badrikashram, the Nar Narayan deities are worshipped. Right? So who is Nar and Narayana? Well, Nar Narayana are same Arjuna and Krishna. So Arjuna is also an eternal associate of the Lord. But here, that's what Krishna is saying. Well, you and me both had many lives. You don't remember, well, I do remember. So Nar means a human. So in that sense, he's assuming, though he's an expansion of the Lord, that particular expansion is assuming a form of an ordinary person. So Arjuna is one of these devotees. And in this verse, it is understood that some millions of years ago, when Lord Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita to sun god Vivaswan, Arjuna in a different capacity was also present. But the difference between Lord and Arjuna is that Lord remembered the incident where Arjuna could not remember. That is the difference between part and parcel. There is a difference between part and parcel living entity and the Supreme Lord. Supreme Lord Narayana, and the part and parcel living entity is Nara. Of course, there are many part and parcels. We are all part and parcels of Krishna. And Arjuna is a special case. And he is also part and parcel, but he's not an ordinary soul. He is a Nitya Mukta. That means he is eternally liberated companion of the Lord. Although Arjuna is addressed herein as a mighty hero who could subdue the enemies, he is unable to recall what happened in his various past births. Therefore, a living entity, however great he may be in the material estimation, he can never be equal to the Supreme Lord. Anyone who is the constant companion of the Lord is certainly a liberated person, but he cannot be equal to the Lord. See, this specifies the unique position of Arjuna. He is a constant companion of the Lord, not only in this life, but in all lives. That means he is certainly liberated. He is eternally liberated. But despite of that, he is not equal to the Lord. Krishna is Krishna. So he has a unique position of the Supreme Personality. The Lord is described in Brahma Samhita as Achyuta. That means he never falls down. He is infallible. Which also means he never forgets himself, even though he is in the contact of matter. Therefore, the Lord and the living entity can never be equal in all respects. Even if the living entity is a great personality, great liberated personality like Arjuna. Although Arjuna is a devotee of the Lord, he sometimes forgets the nature of the Lord, but by the divine grace, a devotee can at once attain the infallible condition of the Lord. Whereas a non-devotee or a demon cannot understand this transcendental nature. Just like a fiery spark, as long as it is in contact with the bonfire, it retains its fiery nature. And a small piece of wood, might fall out and come out of the bonfire and starts losing its fiery nature. But if somebody picks it up and puts it back in the fire, then again it resumes or revives its fiery nature. Similarly, an individual soul might sometimes forget his own divine nature and its association with the Lord. When the soul comes in contact with the matter, it loses its fiery spiritual spark. But as soon as one such a conditioned soul comes in the contact of a devotee who has the spiritual spark, who has that fiery nature, he can pass on that fiery nature to that forgetful living entity, and then that living entity can at once revive its original infallible condition. Consequently, this description in the Gita cannot be understood. Those who have demonic propensities. Krishna remembered the acts which were performed by him millions of years before, but Arjuna could not, despite the fact that both Krishna and Arjuna, they are eternal in nature. I don't even forget. I don't even remember what I ate yesterday for lunch or dinner. Start talking about a week before, memory starts getting even worse. So Krishna is as a Paramatma within our heart, is the source of all remembrance, all forgetfulness, all knowledge. Because he, as a Paramatma, is situated in every heart of every living entity, and he remembers all the lifetimes of all the living entities. And there are millions, not millions, we can't count them. They are everywhere. And this is just one material universe. There are millions of universes, and all the millions of and trillions of universes in the material creation is only 1/4 of the creation of the Lord. The 3/4 of the creation of the Lord is the spiritual world, and there are living entities there also, right? So Krishna is Satta Chitta Ananda Chitta. He is all knowledge, all living entities. So we may also note herein that a living entity forgets everything due to his change of body. But the Lord remembers because he does not change his Satta Chit Ananda body. His body does not change. He's always all full of all knowledge, is all truth, and all bliss. He's Advaita, which means there is no distinction between his body and himself. So Advaita, uh, is used by the impersonalist in their commentaries also. So Lord Shiva, when he appeared as Adi Sankaracharya to propagate the atheistic philosophy of impersonalism. Now, Lord Shiva is also not an ordinary person. So using different grammatical rules and by conjuncture, he, broke it down in different ways and came up with an completely different understanding than what was the original intention of the Vedas. And his purpose in doing that was to make a distinction between devotees and demons. And those who were devotees, they were not bewildered by such an impersonalistic explanation of Adi Sankaracharya, but others were. So the word Advaita, when an impersonalist talks about Advaita, well, they, of course, it's in a different context, but they would say, hey, see, you see, that means there's no difference between the soul and the super soul. It's all one. So it is used in that context. So Dvaita means duality. Advaita means there is no duality. And duality could be in many different ways. Duality means difference between the soul and super soul. That's one kind of duality or dual existence. But here, the duality that we are talking about is between Krishna and his body. In our case, our body and soul is different. So in that sense, we are Dvaita. That means there is a distinction between our body and the soul. In case of Krishna, he's all spirit, right? It's not that he and his body are different. And so Krishna is described here as Advaita. That means there's no difference between his body and his himself. Yeah, and impersonalist understanding in a different context. Again, they say, well, there's no difference between the soul and the super soul, so they use that in that context. Well, yeah, there is difference and there is non-difference. That's why Vaishnavas, when they talk about the philosophy, they say Vishishta Advaita. The Sri Vaishnavas who first defeated the impersonal philosophy of Sankaracharya. Sankaracharya said Kevala Advaitam. Kevala Advait means there is non-difference between soul and super soul in all respects. Kevala. Adi Sankara, then Ramanujacharya appeared, he established Visishta Advaita. That means, yes, there is no difference between soul and super soul, but only qualitatively. But quantitatively, there is a difference. And there are some unique attributes of the super soul, Paramatma, which are not present in the soul, and that is Visishta. Visishta means specialty. So he established the philosophy of Visishta Advaita, right? And then there are different acharyas, like the Rudra Sampradaya from Lord Shiva, Pushti Mark followers. Their philosophy is they call Suddha Advait. Not Keval Advait, Suddha Advait. That means it's in a purified form. So there are different variations. And then in Madhvacharya, they have Dvaitavad. So they emphasize on different aspects of the truth, but they're all correct. The only philosophy which is not correct is the impersonal understanding, which is Keval Advaitavad. But the all remaining four acharyas, including the Kumar Sampradaya, where their philosophy is Dvait Advait. They say both different, non-different. So everything in relation to him is spirit, whereas the conditioned soul is different from his material body. And because the Lord's body and the self are identical, his position is always different from that of an ordinary living entity, even when he descends to the material platform. So when he appears in this material world, he is not subject to be afflicted by the modes of nature, when he comes in contact with the matter, because the modes of the nature and matter are expansions of him, right? That is his material energy. Just like a jailer, when he enters a cell by his own choice, he's not implicated or he's not bound, by the four walls of the cell. So demons cannot adjust themselves to this transcendental nature of the Lord, which the Lord himself explained in the following verse. And so it's very difficult for those who have asuric propensities to accept this as truth. We'll take a pause over here. I think we're almost time. I don't think we want to take another verse. We'll take a pause over here. So we did 2 verses. And we did a revision of the first 3 verses. Any questions here? For verse number 5? Yes, no purport. Okay. Looks like there are no questions. And we can conclude the class, and I'll post the recordings over the weekend. Thank you, everybody. Hare Krishna. Nitin Prabhu, you had a question? I can't hear you. Hare Krishna. Can you hear me?
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Okay. Hare Krishna. We conclude the class.
Hare Krishna.